First, I should say a couple things. I'm Bill Schnoor. I've been in and around the Yale startup ecosystem for a very long time. And I think it's so cool that this gathering is taking place, I have to say. And everybody ought to pat themselves on the chest for being here and being part of this scene. What I'm going to do is introduce our panelists. I'm going to have some questions tailored for each of them individually. We're then going to move to kind of a group session, jump ball questions for the group. And then at the end, we'll have at least 10, 15 minutes for Q&A. So hold your questions towards the end. Part of that is we have, this is being recorded and projected outside. So by having the Q&A at the end, the folks with the microphones can actually find you rather than interspersing in the middle. So at the very end of our panel, we have Noura Daadaa. She is a proud Canadian. So just to show, Yale has no hostility to Canada. A deep technical background, 10 years with Nokia. The last 4+ years with Google, where she founded Healthcare AI for Startups and currently leads Google Cloud's Healthcare and Life Sciences AI for Startup program. So working for a big company, serving small companies. Next to Noura, we have Rex Ying. Rex is actually the guy who's traveled the least. He's here at Yale as an assistant professor of computer science. But he has a really intriguing mix of research and commercial exposure and expertise. He was a founding team member with an AI startup out of Stanford. He has spent time working at DeepMind, Facebook, and Pinterest. That's a pretty interesting combination of companies. His current research is focused on graph neural networks, explainable models, and other AI foundational models. So it'll be interesting to hear from him, his perspective at the earliest stage of inception. And then finally, next to me is Julie Wolfe. Julie, like the other two panelists, and unlike me, I was a history major here, has a deep technical background. She has a PhD in microbiology, immunology, and cancer biology. She moved over to the investing world 4 years ago, joining IndieBio New York, which is part of SOSV. And she's currently a partner with 2048 Ventures, a New York City-based early-stage venture capital firm. So let me turn, Rex, initially to you. Well, actually, first, I would like each of the panelists to elaborate on their backgrounds and address specifically how, in their work, the explosion of AI, particularly since ChatGPT's emergence 2.5 years ago, has interacted with cloud in the work they're doing and trends they're seeing. So why don't we start down at the end?
First, thank you so much for the invitation, and it's such an honor to be here at Yale. Thanks for the audience for joining us today. I would say, as an engineer myself, I joined Google at the middle of the pandemic. And at that point, where we see how the world was changing and what's happening in healthcare specifically, I would answer this question from my lens. I work with founders and startups who are focusing mainly in healthcare and life sciences. I have seen the surge of implementing and fixing toughest problems in the world with AI has been increasingly kind of skyrocketing. I wouldn't say it's just because of the ChatGPT. It's the need of where the industry is heading and what problems the world needs to solve. So my perspective on that is the world is changing, and this tool will help founders solve really super complicated problems that we were not able to solve it before at scale like today. For example, researcher, take few hours, few days to do a research about some specific topic. Today with AI, you can do it literally with few seconds, and you can classify all the research paper around the globe with, matter of seconds, and then kind of help you advance the research and the findings. So I would say the world is changing, and those tools is really allowing founders and innovators to grow at scale.
Rex.
I would also like to express my gratitude, and thanks for inviting me to this panel. I think ChatGPT, or let's say large language models in general, has changed the way academia does research quite profoundly. At least, I started my research journey around 10 years ago, like 2014, around that, right? That's when deep learning started to get popular. But since then, I've never seen this kind of big changes in the paradigm in which like people do research. Since large language models have came out, surprisingly, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Previously, like the trend I thought is that things are getting deeper, but it's also in some sense also getting narrower. Right? There were a lot of areas of research in machine learning before 2016. And then, around that time, that's where deep learning is like 80% of what people are doing. And now, what it seems like large language model, which is only a very small subset of deep learning, is what academia does like 80% of the time. And people are sort of like kind of not forced, but like they almost always like kind of crowded into this area, which kind of strains a lot of resources also. And academia is in this like position to adjust. And I guess I want to just bring up that this is also why I think cloud computing is also getting very, very important in academia research, which has never been the case before. In the past, the models are always deployable in, let's say, a 4-node GPU machine in one of the school clusters or in one of the servers in the lab. But this is no longer the case. Most of the time in academia now, when people started doing language models, people started having to getting some like cloud credits, getting some cloud usage in order to interact with large language models that are hosted remotely that they don't even have control of entirely because it's in one of the cloud servers, and they have to basically interact with large language model with limited API calls. Could be like fine tuning, could be post training operations and things like that. So yeah, the paradigm has mostly changed, and now cloud is super important just because that's one of the most important way for us to get access to these SOTA industry scale or trillion scale large language models, or in general foundation models, and be able to do research, achieve state of the art in various applications and topics.
Thank you. Julie.
Also, I would like to echo my fellow panelists, say thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. I've been coming to the Yale Innovation Summit for a number of years, and it's really great to see things like additional tracks like the technology track, especially given the biotech roots and kind of the blending of these that I think we'll talk about a little bit today. So I actually was leaving academic research around the time that you were starting academic research, Rex, so perhaps a little more conventional kind of wet bench experience. But around that time was when we saw, I think, some of the early stages of, let's say, bio and AI with recursion and the formation of folks who are building their own proprietary data sets that they could then use for models in order to search for things that would otherwise take just too much time, too much labor, et cetera. And I think that that's something that perhaps you mentioned ChatGPT. I don't think that that's something that has necessarily allowed this to happen, but what it has done is allowed people to become familiar with, let's say, some of the large language models and ways that people are interrogating large data sets in ways that perhaps our everyday kind of person was not aware of previously. And that goes to academic researchers, but that also goes to consumers who are looking into their own health and the ability to look through, let's say, chatbots that are going to help them look through either validated or unvalidated data sets in order to look for their own symptoms or assist doctors with different types of note-taking, and time-saving techniques, and the ability to sift through records, et cetera. And so I think that just in general, there's been kind of this explosion of data sets, and obviously we're talking about where a lot of these are stored today, that has led to the ability to create models that are able to search through these large data sets in ways that previously were just not feasible.
Okay, so Rex, I'm going to come back to you with a question, but just first to show that there's nothing new under the sun, you mentioned the increased attention on AI in university research labs. Well, I'm the oldest person on the stage today, and I'm probably one of the older people here in this room. I actually worked on an AI IPO back in 1984. It was a hardware company called Symbolics. Does anybody recognize that name? Okay, in the back. It was a company that came out of the AI lab at MIT. It was building hardware optimized to run Lisp, which is a Lisp processing language. This is what passed for AI software back in those days. Company went public in a really big IPO of about $20 million. That was a big IPO in 1984. Unfortunately, they burned about half the money on relocating from these cramped, rabbit warren-like offices near Kendall Square in Cambridge out to a beautiful suburban campus out in Concord, Mass. What they discovered was all their coders, who were the funky-looking guys with long hair, and the real talent on the team didn't want to leave Kendall Square, so they wound up moving back in. They burned a lot of money on the headquarters. The company wound up actually going bust a few years later, but it does, this is a great tech trivia question, they do have the distinction of having recorded the first ever URL with a .com appendage. So symbolics.com, which is still an alive website, was the first one ever recorded. But you talked about the research in the university, and yet you in your career have maintained very active relationships and dialogues with corporate research groups. And I wonder if you might talk a little bit about where the locus of activity is, how do the two groups work together, what are the opportunities there, and what maybe some of the challenges are managing those.
Yeah, of course. I think the biggest advantage of industry research, at least in the field of AI, I think as most of you would have imagined, would be data and would be the compute, the scale of compute. And these are things that academia really sort of don't have, and that prevents people from training large language models from scratch, for example, in academia. So a lot of collaborations that we have done in the past with the industry is about this complementing the strength of each other, like in terms of scale, in terms of data sets. Now they have the cloud, they have a large corpus, and a lot of things are what the industry already have, and this is something that we can use to kind of further our research ideas. On the other side, I think we are also providing things that the industry would be interested. Some examples include alignment. For example, they want, say, medical domains or science and engineering domains. A lot of these startups and enterprises wanted the language models, or in general foundation models that are multimodal, to have certain behavior that are catered to their needs and their downstream applications. That's where we can take existing large language models and we can apply things like reinforcement learning, fine-tuning, and continual pre-training and various techniques to kind of help them with these kind of specific downstream needs, and in the meantime, develop algorithms to be able to better work with large language models in any kind of downstream application. Another area that I thought would be quite needed from academia is things that are related to trustworthiness of models. So like we're hoping to combat things like hallucination, we want to reduce the kind of inaccurate behaviors or unexpected behaviors of these foundation models as much as possible through retrieval, through out of distribution robustness, through interaction or behavior in like cases where there is less data available. So these kind of robustness, reliability requirements from industry are something that we academia are spending a lot of efforts on. We are also very interested in things like fairness, privacy, these things that the sort of industry kind of needs because of all the regulations and the promises that they give to the clients or users, but they typically kind of want to focus their engineering effort on something else like performance. And that's where academia are very interested. And then finally, the last aspect of this collaboration would be things that are very forward-looking. So we're not looking at the immediate what's next in development of these foundation models, but rather we're interested in what could be the next trillion-dollar idea, right, out there. And it could involve completely different architecture. It could involve, for example, different paradigm of doing pre-training, like, for example, discrete diffusion has been one of the alternatives that was quite popular, right, compared to the mainstream autoprogressive large language models. So those forward-looking ideas and something that are very new are things that academia will be super interested. And if we see some promise, now this is when we can kind of transfer and can write papers, and the industry can sort of take these ideas and further it with larger compute and data.
And how about some of the challenges?
The challenges for the
collaborations between university and
I think it's also very kind of tied to these areas of collaboration. Like, for example, one challenge is how people kind of treat data, right? As academia, we always want things to be open source. We want benchmarks to be reproducible. Right, but at the same time, industry has their need to kind of protect their data, to protect some parts of the model, which results in some papers that are kind of controversial. Sometimes these collaborations resulted in publications that people find very hard to reproduce because of those specific things that are not released. And another example is I had students who did internship and work as a bridge to collaborate to facilitate the collaboration between my lab and the industry, and then they ended up having some team involved in the industry that says, oh, we want to protect this algorithm, we want the results to be kind of used to in their product first. So this kind of discussion kind of always happens. Sometimes we manage to put things out, but in some other cases, it's more like closed source development, which I think is not super helpful to the research community.
Right. Okay, and Noura, you're at Google working to support emerging young healthcare and life sciences companies in the cloud with AI. What are the needs of the companies? How are you meeting them? How has Google's offering evolved over time? And I didn't think of this question when we spoke last week, but after hearing Rex, do you ever get into issues where the companies are spin-outs from universities? Does that ever become a complicating factor? I'm curious.
I would say my experience working with startups, healthcare and life sciences, we all know that healthcare data in general, I read an article, it says 36% of the world data is healthcare, life sciences. This includes medical imaging, patients' history, et cetera, et cetera. So startup founders, when they were looking to innovate at scale and build something that have never been built before, they need an infrastructure that allow them to do model training and inferencing at scale, the security at scale built in. I wanted to have the ability to see as a scientist, as not a cloud engineer, if there is any vulnerability in my infrastructure. I wanted to have the best-in-class AI model. Or also, if I wanted to have an AI model that I can, by the way, own it and wrap it, and that's why we have also the open source version of our AI models, Gemma 3, for example. We just launched last week MedGemma, which is another open source model based on Gemini. So you get the best in class of AI multimodal, able to read images and text. So startup founders would look to all this technology and what we offer for them and then kind of, innovate. I am humbled every time I talk to a founder. I'm like, wow, I can't wait to see how the world gonna look like in, very soon, because you're thinking about solving a real world problems, either from drug discovery to diagnostic to even understand your own health, Sometimes when you go visit a doctor, we understand and we empathize, like they have very short limited time to see patients. So imagine if you can get the generative AI summary about, tell me everything about this patient. When was the last time this patient saw me, or how he was doing, Today you can do that quickly versus click, 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 and trying to understand the situation. So when I talk to startup founders and I see, well, the tools is there, it's for them to innovate. And to your second part of the question, what do we have? I don't mean to be a sales pitch here, but for startup founders in the room, we have
You don't have any competitors on the stage.
No.
Fire away.
We have actually very strong startup program, credit program. So for startup founders in the room, if you wanted to build in Google Cloud, there is, to your point earlier, we have a free credit program, equity free, to incentivize the founders to build in Google Cloud and innovate. So I'm proud to say we have a great technology and infrastructure to allow founders to build at scale.
Thank you. Well, you mentioned health data as being a little more complicated to deal with.
Yeah.
It's the healthcare system is last bastion of the fax machine. And this boot is because I injured a tendon in my foot, and my orthopedic doctor referred me for physical therapy. And this is within a very large health system in Boston. I'm not going to say which one. And I woke up in a different time zone one morning to have 6 phone calls from the physical therapist's office where I'd scheduled an appointment to go be seen. And they were calling me desperately because they couldn't read the handwriting on the fax, which doctor made the referral. So they were calling me to tell them by phone who the doctor was. I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. Anyway, so Julie, you're coming at it from the other side of the table as you're investing in and assessing early stage companies. How do you think about their approach? How effective do you find the founding teams, and how much support do they need? Really looking at the world, because there's obviously other cloud providers out there and navigating that world. How do you go about doing that?
So I should maybe just start by saying that at 2048 Ventures, we invest in technologies with data moats. So we are very aware of a lot of the services from Google and folks like yourself. And so we will help them to become connected. Now, at the stage that we're looking at them, it somewhat depends. If they're coming out of the university, they may be coming with a model that they've developed in-house with their own data. To be quite frank, often those have to be rebuilt by creating a more robust system as the founders become commercial, because the way that things are built in academia are just using different resources, and they need to take into account building out their own certifications for HIPAA if they're looking at patient data, or becoming SOC 2 compliant, and all the different types of ways that they need to make sure that that data is secure. We often will look at folks who are coming. In fact, I was just speaking at the poster session with a researcher who was looking at medical imaging and saying, I found this novel AI approach to identifying a certain type of diagnostic. Now, that's very promising to an early stage research or investor, because you already have the data set on which the model can be built. And yes, it might need to be tweaked, and that's the kind of thing that will continue to be iterated on and needs to be validated through clinical trials, of course. But the fact that the data set exists on which you can build the model is very promising. So that is probably the most ideal situation. But if the data is built and the model is generated, now, is that going to be the case all of the time? Of course not. Some folks are going to say, I know that there is a problem here. I know that there is data that I can access that other people don't have access to, and we can kind of talk about what the difference is in terms of like a wedge for a startup versus folks like Google, who are also developing some very sophisticated and applicable models as well, and how you use those in order to build out the products. So I don't know if that answers the question fully, but yes, we do certainly look for folks who are collecting large data sets through a variety of different mechanisms. And we connect them with folks in the ecosystem in order to make sure that they have the capacity to continue to build that.
Okay. So, and I'm going to just to kind of a jump ball question. Whoever wants to take it first, just jump right in. Obviously, the scale of the cloud computing infrastructure has just exploded, and the levels of investment are staggering, and the amount of capital raised, both by the cloud providers, by the energy producers, some of the other infrastructure players, is immense. And it seems like it's becoming a game of giants fighting it out. where within that world do you see the best opportunities for innovation and disruptors to come in and say, okay, there's this landscape with all these big players, whereas I as a startup can go find a niche and generate some value for myself and my investors?
Well, I can kick that off since I kind of ended on that note. I think that one of the things that we as an early stage investment firm think about is that the large corporates who disrupted, let's say in the last several generations of disruption through internet, mobilization, et cetera, are much better at adopting and developing their own technology than the previous generations. And so it's very important that founders understand how they are going to build a very specific solution to a very specific problem for their first go-to-market. Now, there's opportunities after that to kind of branch out and start to develop, as we say, claws into the workflow or become the storage unit for some of the data sets that perhaps their clients are working with. But the most important thing is to be fairly narrow in terms of understanding what you are going to market with. What is the actual solution? So I can't say a specific thing, right? Like this or that, right? Like we take it on a case-by-case basis, but we want to understand that there is not, someone is not going to say we are going to build like AGI for healthcare, right? Like that would just be much too broad. And in fact, even in terms of diagnostics, for example, we would look for a very specific use case within a certain patient population that is not currently being served, and perhaps the ability to either discern a novel biomarker or be additive to kind of the value within the healthcare system.
So one example of a company that sort of fits the mold you described, which does have Yale ties, that I think found a good niche and focused and is driving very rapid growth, is a Boston company called Starburst Data. Anybody here know Starburst? It's both founders were Yale's. Justin Borgman is the CEO, and they essentially have a platform, data management platform that sits on top of all the clouds. Because many big companies, of course, it's not a single cloud. They're using public clouds, hybrid clouds. Big companies that have bought a lot of other companies have data sitting in the various operations they've acquired. This is a layer of software that sits above all that, makes the management and access easy and not hard. And of course, you know, the power of AI is only as good as the access to the data, and they've really become that access point for a lot of big companies, and they're having a lot of good growth. Any other ideas?
I would add also the problem is very important. I guess every big solution starts like, what is the problem are we solving, and where is the best tools and infra that allow me to solve it at scale. I love when you mentioned bringing the solutions, bring it together. And it's not about just building this gigantic kind of AGI for healthcare, but what does that solve? The pathology, the diagnostic, preventive health, longevity, like what is the exact kind of case to go after?
I would say something very straightforward, like as models get more sophisticated, as the scale of compute gets bigger, building 100 billion parameter, even trillion scale parameter models. Do people think that it's becoming harder to do this, or more? It's technically more involved to do these things. And in my opinion, it's quite the contrary. No, it's actually getting simpler. The type of techniques that people use nowadays to build state-of-the-art language models are embarrassingly simple. This might sound counterintuitive, but really, if you look at in the past, people have designed different ways. Oh, there's theoretical guarantees for this. This way, with careful tuning, you kind of get a little bit better. People are doing a lot of this research, but now what people see is that if you just give it enough compute, you just give it enough number of parameters, and different ways all work. Optimizer, for example, Atom works. Atom W works. With large enough examples, or data sets, all of them work. So like the techniques people use are actually becoming like simpler and simpler. And this is, I think this is something that startups should take into account, because there is really no secret sauce. It's not like some bio-experimental patents that people file. Like there is no secret sauce. Like if you can think of it, hundreds of or millions of other people have already thought about such algorithms. So I really don't think like there is one secret algorithm now in the world that OpenAI is doing or whatever company is doing that other people do not know. That's not the case. It's like the fact that they build larger models, they build successful models because they have great engineering capabilities. They have great services that allow them to try out and train long enough, collect data, clean data. It's this entire pipeline, this entire system that kind of make things work, not like one secret sauce, secret algorithm that kind of give them like a competitive advantage. And the same thing goes for startups. So they should not be like thinking about like what's difficult in terms of algorithms or what's like some techniques that people have not been using. Right? But I kind of very much agree with what Julie said. Like instead, startups should do two things. Like one thing is predict what these companies are, really spending a lot of time and effort on, and this might not be something that you want to focus on unless you are already at a very big scale. Like an example is video generation, right? Look at what Google I/O is doing. Like if you are just a small startup, don't do this kind of thing. Like that you predict the companies are kind of focusing their resources on. You just don't have that kind of scale to and data to kind of make it competitive. But rather, if you predict that this is something that they are not yet interested or they are not yet focusing on, that's a great opportunity, right? One example is, for example, people did things related to retrieval on company-specific things, on domain-specific areas, and that's not something that these companies kind of focus on. They only focus on, say, retrieval for like public search engine, things like that. But if it's very domain specific and there are specific things you want to retrieve, or even structured data, like let's say retrieve from tabular data, right, retrieving from databases, that's much less kind of a niche area that startups can get a lot of competitive advantages on. Other examples include things like trustworthiness. As I said, how do we ensure fairness? We provide software, provide services that allow language models to be fair to different populations and have better personalization. All these are great opportunities, I think, but don't work on things that kind of big companies are focusing.
And if I can just add one other thing, I think it's important for founders to talk to their customers. And as someone who works with very early stage founders, they often are working with healthcare systems or big pharma, and they want to collaborate. And exactly as Rex is saying, like the ability to retrieve certain amount of data, largely, I mean, for the most part, the convention has been, these folks are not going to share their data with you, or they will not move their data out of their cloud. They want to work on-prem. But in some circumstances, I've actually been working with some founders who have found that they have a solution that the healthcare system is willing to move some de-identified data to their off of their on-prem kind of system in order for the startup's model to be applied to it. And so some of these conventions are also, I would say, shifting, and it's important for founders to kind of stay abreast of, okay, what is the best way for data to be handled or retrieved, just select parts of it.
Okay, so that's a good transition to my next question, which is as there's this explosion of data in the cloud, and AI, of course, is a data, has a data hunger, and that's what powers it. It's all out in the cloud. How do you think in your work, and how do you see others thinking about things like compliance and security issues? Because the security issues are kind of scary. I mean, and AI, frankly, has been portrayed both as the savior of mankind and as the source of mankind's ultimate destruction, and that's inevitably going to lead to compliance and legal issues.
Right. I mean, there are many different solutions and products out there in the cloud to help protect your data. To Julie's point, also when we're talking about moving sensitive data, there is many solutions to de-identify them, to secure them, like specific compute that can be on-prem as well. Like there is many different architecture ways to protect what do you put. I'm going to talk about my own personal experience. I'm kind of tech savvy. I love my own cloud. Before joining public cloud, I had my own cloud at home. And after I joined, I realized like I could be hacked like in 5 minutes. So I kind of like, no, I have to move it because I now have better understanding how do I protect my data, how I make sure certain things reside in different regions. So there is so many ways the cloud can offer to help users protect their data when they're talking about, sensitive information. So that's my own experience. And I think healthcare, when we think about health, it's collection of data, your EHR, your devices, your nutrition, a lot of data. And so I think being optimistic and seeing what I see, I think it's a shared responsibility between obviously the user and the infrastructure, but this is one of the things that we excel at. So I think it's a very interesting topic.
Yeah, I think that it's twofold. There's also, the system side, which is what cloud is and stuff will be kind of contributing, right? Like ensuring security by building sandboxes, filtering out bad contents, make sure there is like isolated thing with secure API. There's no loophole. And that's all things that cloud can contribute to. And then on the other side, there's also what AI model can contribute to, better, more safe behavior through alignments, reinforcement learning with human feedback, various ways to kind of ensure that the answer kind of are safe to different groups of people. So I think it's a sort of both.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
So do you think I've read some arguments that the cloud providers are becoming modern day utilities. What the hallmark of, we think of traditional utilities, electricity providers, water systems, they have massive economies of scale. The need is pervasive, and that's kind of true of cloud today. And maybe this should be directed at you, coming from Google, is the cloud at the point where it's becoming so concentrated we should be thinking about regulating it as a utility? Or is there enough competitive pressure among the various providers to keep innovation afoot?
I don't know how to answer this question. I would just say from the lens where I am right now, we provide the tools to help founders and innovators create. So you mentioned something important earlier about data. So the AI and the machine learning, with those foundational models, you actually do not need the massive data to train a model if the model is pre-trained. You can fine-tune it with a smaller amount of data. So I would think about it from this lens is, now we want to innovate, we need to move faster to break through new innovations. So we need an infrastructure that allow those innovators to grow at scale, have their data secure, have the right tool to look if I want to do analytics, I want to connect data from everywhere, different regions. So I think I would look at it from the necessity because it is simply what the world needs right now. I would look at it from also my lens. Like if I want to read about topic something, it would take me a long time if I don't have an AI to assist me with things. So I would look at it as a necessity. I don't know how to answer in terms of regulation, but I would look at it as this is where innovators, would be, if you want to look and go fast, and you need an infrastructure to allow you to grow at scale.
Okay, I'm going to have one more question for the group, and then we're going to throw it open for questions from the audience. So get them ready, and I think the microphone folks will be around with microphones there. I see them in the back. So if you were able to magically step through the looking glass and suddenly be a free agent and able to start over, what would knowing everything that's going on in the world as you see it, where would you want to be and what would you want to be doing to take advantage of all these trends in AI and cloud?
I would say, and my leadership and my team knows that, I love healthcare, and I think I wanted to see a cancer-free world where people stop suffering. And I think tools like that will help us advance research and, solve real issues that last generations. So if I have this magic wand, I will do it over and over again until I reach what I want to reach. And I hope I can see it.
Well, I hope you get there. I hope you get there.
Yeah.
Rex, how about you?
I think the most interesting thing or exciting thing to me would be to work on continuing the scaling law that have prevailed so far. Right, currently the status is that as we increase compute, increase data, almost exponentially, the performance kind of also dramatically improves, and to the point that we think we are sort of close to AGI. We're very close, but like, are we really going to achieve that with the current technology? I'm actually not so sure. I'm still a little bit skeptical. This is a topic of debate, but I'm skeptical because we've seen evidences that this scaling law is kind of slowing down. It's kind of plateaued. Now, this is also like people have different opinion, but we've seen evidences of things like that a lot, like increasing the model size further beyond like a few 100 billion parameters is not really yielding like satisfactory performance improvements. It's very marginal. Spend 10 times more resources, 10 times more energy is giving you like almost unnoticeable amount of increase in benchmark performance. So I think we're almost at the stage where it's kind of plateaued a bit with current technology, and something exciting to work on is really how do we continue this scaling? Like how do we continue to be able to increase the size, increase the data, and increase the performance at the same time. There have been discussions, there were keynotes in NeurIPS last year that Ilya has been saying that pre-training as we know it is ending, is coming to an end, like meaning more data does not seem to help more in terms of language model capabilities. But I think there are still ways forward, right? It could be new architectures, it could be new embedding algorithms, it could be reinforcement learning, like learning with the experiences. But what's the best way to kind of continue?
So follow up, and not to hijack perhaps another panel. How about quantum computing?
I don't know much.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to admit I don't know much. Like there's so at Yale computer science, there's one expert, Yongshan, who's an expert in quantum. So from what I hear from him, again, don't quote me on that, but I think it's still very, 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 very far away from actually being usable, in terms of reliability. This is a very active field of quantum machine learning, pioneered by Caltech. Yongshan is also an expert there, but it's very, very far away. People are thinking at how to do quantum and showing quantum supremacy on linear models. So,
and yet companies are already spending money on post-quantum cryptography because they have to.
Cryptography. I think cryptography is a very realistic.
Even if there's a small chance of it coming about, they have to be ready.
I think it's very far away for AI. It's not that far away for cryptography. Yeah, because there's short algorithm.
What's your next act?
Oh, I don't know. I'm also very excited about new target identification using multimodal models. I think preventative care and the ability to find and prevent kind of negative chronic diseases. I'm very excited about that. And to be honest, one of my favorite sayings, quotes, I can't remember who says it, is the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. And as you mentioned, doctors' offices, perhaps outside of New Haven, are not necessarily places where you see a lot of these technologies adopted very early. And I think that giving clinicians time back, helping patients to find the right specialist, all of these things within the healthcare world, I think, are applications of some of the technologies that are being developed today that I'm very excited to see moving forward.
Well, for better or worse, we have an exploding federal deficit. We have levels of spending on healthcare that's twice the rest of the world with worse outcomes. And so there's going to have to be ways to drive more efficiencies there, and I think AI is going to have to be part of that, without a doubt. Okay, let's see. Do we have any questions from the audience? I can't see. Up in the back. I think he was one of the guys who knew about symbolics. This should be interesting.
I'll be brave and go first. Thank you guys, delightful panel. I was so happy that healthcare and healthcare data came up often. I spent about 2 decades working on healthcare data integration, and I now work in healthcare AI governance. And one sort of piece of hidden wisdom in our area of the industry is that everyone wants to share data, but everyone wants to share the other guy's data. That's right. So, and part of it is, part of the answer we've looked at are sort of institutional incentives and ways to create better ecosystems and just being nice and friendly. But part of it is the legal framework that underpins data ownership, right? So the idea is that whoever owns the data is going to own the windfall that results from monetizing the data into a product. Our institutional property law is based on the last century, right? We sort of, when we started compiling phone books, we made the decision, the legal system did, that the person who compiled the phone book had IP right in the compilation. And we're now trying to apply that same model to data used to train artificial intelligence models. Now, it's an analogy, but is it the best analogy? So the question I'd love for you guys to consider, and with the recognition this may be way out there, is are there basic changes that you could imagine in intellectual property law, right? Who owns what? Who owns the results of work? That would make data collaboration easier. That would make data integration better incentivized for patients, providers, payers, vendors, right? And platform owners.
I guess I'm the lawyer on the stage. Let me take that one. So I think it's a great question. It's interesting. I am old enough to have seen waves of new technologies emerge and disrupt, and it's the truth that technical innovators and scientists always outpace the ability of the legal system, legislatures and courts to keep up. And that was driven home for me. I don't know if I've become addicted to a podcast called Acquired.fm. Anybody here a fan? I recommend it without reservation to everyone. It's a couple of guys, I can't remember their names, they're out in Seattle. They're really smart. They are great storytellers. And every episode, they put material out regularly, but not on a fixed schedule, tells the story of a great company. Founding story, what was done right, what was done wrong. And they just do a tremendous amount of research. They package it in an interesting way, and then they layer in analysis. And there are actually 2 episodes devoted to Microsoft, which are just fascinating. And they take it all the way back to when Bill Gates was a 6th grader at the Lakeside School in Seattle. And what happened was the parent association had a bake sale, and they either sold a lot of stuff or they had a good pricing model because they had so much extra money they didn't know what to do with it. And this was 1968. They wound up renting time on a DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation, computer owned by GE in Seattle that was available on a timeshare. And so they had access to computing resources, and that's when Bill Gates started. And Microsoft, started in the mid-'70s, and the whole story about what happened with the PC and IBM, it's just really fascinating, and the IP is really important to that. But software wasn't covered by copyright until 1980. Now, what happened in 1980? It wasn't a court decision. It was the Congress got together, recognizing that there was this emerging industry, because up until the early 70s, there was no such thing as a separate software industry. IBM made every computer, and the software was embedded in the computers. Then, for a whole bunch of reasons, that changed, and so Congress had to deal with it. I think in the same way here, what we have are technologies rapidly outpacing the legal system, which is inherently, in our system, kind of backward-looking, and there's a need for change. And if we can't find a way to change and evolve, we are going to run into problems. Because then, if the legislature can't legislate, then the courts have to adjudicate because people are going to sue. But that's like a hugely inefficient way to make policy in this area. So I think, and I'm a corporate lawyer, I help companies raise money and buy and sell other companies. I know enough intellectual property to be dangerous, but I think unquestionably we need some new models, and we need creative ways to think about it. And an integral part of that in AI and data is going to be privacy concerns, and particularly with health data, how do you protect people's privacy, because the information that's accessible, it's one thing if it's in a bunch of paper files in a doctor's office. Maybe you worry about a Watergate break-in and some files being stolen. But if it's digital, anybody can get it. And we all know there's a lot of bad guys out there trying to hack their way in and get access to that kind of data. It's happening all the time. I work with a lot of security software companies. I spent a week out in San Francisco at RSA a few weeks ago. I mean, the level of interest and activity in the security space is just immense. But I applaud your efforts in healthcare data. I'm curious, have you ever run across a guy named Paul Bleischer?
I know the name, but I don't.
Yeah, you should get to know him. He was a medical doctor. It's funny. I now, all the young companies I work with, I challenge them. I say that your goal is, raise some money, make some money for your investors, and do well. But your real objective should be to have an episode on Acquire.fm.
That's true.
And Paul really deserves one. He was actually a practicing dermatologist. He got frustrated with the fact that as a practicing doctor, you only treat one patient at a time. So he became head of research at a biotech company in Boston. He quickly got really frustrated with how inefficient the clinical development, the clinical trial process was. So he started a company, probably mid to late 90s, called Phase Forward, which was the first company to build a web-based platform for collecting and monitoring clinical trial data. And raised venture funding. They actually hired a software guy. They hired a guy named Bob Weiler, who'd been an executive at Lotus, in to be the CEO, went public, had a great run. Oracle wound up buying them, and it became the core of Oracle's offerings. Anyway, Paul had left. He'd become the chief medical officer of a health data company called Humedica that Optum wound up buying. He then ran something which to this day I think still exists up in Boston called Optum Labs. So if you're interested in healthcare data, you should know about Optum Labs, because this was a joint venture between the Mayo and Optum, which realized that there's all this opportunity for innovation in healthcare, but to innovate, you need access to data. And so what they did was they took a lot of Optum data and anonymized it and cleaned it up and made it available to these startups. And Paul founded that and ran that for a bunch of years. He tried to retire a few years ago to travel. Unfortunately, that was right before COVID, so he didn't do much traveling for a couple of years. Instead, he went back and got a master's in machine learning at MIT. And he's still a dermatologist, but he's an advisor and around a lot of interesting stuff in that area. Anyway. Any other victims? No. Oh my goodness.
One in the back.
Oh. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it, and I enjoyed this panel a lot. I have a question related to the title, AI and Next Generation of Cloud Computing. So with the advancement of cloud computing through time, which requires a tremendous infrastructure and energy consumption, so aside from increasing the technological gap between developed countries and the global south countries, what about the environmental effects? Like with the advancement of global computing, that may cause more harm to the environment, which will be more reflected on developing countries. So what's the vision for the next generation of AI and the cloud computing regarding this environmental issues and, let's say, mediate this effect? Thanks.
As a startup founder, there is actually a tool to select the region that is going to show you the scale of how green an effect on energy, the kind of the carbon footprint. So I would think about it from the lens like infrastructure. This is if you decided to run in cloud, the way to look at it is where do I need to run it in a sense that this infrastructure have a positive impact in the environment. So this is one of the kind of the tool coming to my mind. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Do you have a?
Yeah, I think it's not going to be, there's going to be many solutions necessary here. One is more efficient compute, right? And you can even imagine that AI can be used in order to improve that, but also investments in energy and green energy solutions and additional, sources to run these things, not just in the global south, but everywhere. And so that's, my vision is one of more sustainable energy sources that are able to power these very, very energy intensive requirements.
Yeah, it's just if you plot out trends, say over the last few years, out 10 years, it just doesn't work, and it doesn't work because the power production isn't there, and also our utility grids are creaking and ancient and really on the verge of breaking down. So, in the world, I've seen at least half a dozen really interesting startups addressing the efficiency issue, some through semiconductor design, some through software design, and a tremendous amount of innovation in green energy. There's a lot of interest in nuclear, which people may be scared about, but for better or for worse, it is carbon free. It's a base load. It's not like when Spain and Portugal lost all their power for a day. That was kind of a disaster. It was because of the difficulty managing the solar and wind power there. So I guess I'm the eternal optimist. It's funny. I mean, we all go through market cycles. Some markets, we were talking about the biotech market. It's really tough right now. Markets go up, markets go down. But fundamentally, if you're an innovator, as long as the world has unmet needs and human ingenuity hasn't been exhausted, there's going to be opportunities. And back in the day when I was a young lawyer, I spent a lot of time over at MIT. I didn't come down to Yale that much, I'm sorry to say, talking to students about launching companies and about innovation and things like that. And there was a great quote from the chairman of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office from about 1878 when he announced proudly that everything that ever could be invented was invented, and they should just shut up the office. And that was 150 years ago. So I think it's a great question. I think there will be, because it's not sustainable. And when something isn't sustainable, something's going to break or something's going to change. And I think things will change and it'll be for the positive. Let's see, we got 3 more minutes. We're going to have 3 more minutes of sunshine, or we can have 1 more question. Going once, going twice. Okay, we get 3 minutes of sunshine. I want to thank you all for being here today, being at the conference. Thank you. Nice job. Hopefully somebody